And there we go.
Hey, good afternoon. Welcome to Trail Talk.
Hi, guys.
We are so glad you could join us. We're live at the Chisholm Trail Heritage Center right here in Duncan, Oklahoma. I'm Edie.
And I'm Mary.
And we're in our classroom studio today, and we are continuing our lesson on the Oklahoma statehood movement. We're going from the Indian Territory directly to the Oklahoma Territory part of it. We're gonna hit on the land runs a little bit, but we could do a whole land run thing, that's separate. So the land run thing, this is true. The whole land curriculum, actually. But we'll hit the land run thing. Maybe we'll go back and add that next week. But anyway, for now, this is where we're going, and we're gonna pick up. I think I might have actually covered a little bit of this last week, but kind of talking about the dilemma that Indian Territory and Oklahoma Territory Indian Territory specifically kind of found themselves in once the state was divided into the two territories. With all the discussions of should there be two states admitted to the Union? Should it just be one state? Should the just all those kinds of things, because people thought Oklahoma Territory would be too small to be considered a state, whether it would, because it was going to so whoever was president, that party is going to be able to strongly influence a new territory because they're selecting the governor and different entities, important entities, ruling people in those territories. So Theodore Roosevelt was president, and so that meant the Republican Party was going to have the upper hand. So the predominantly Democratic South wasn't excited about adding a new Republican state. The East Coast, the Eastern states weren't excited about adding a Western state. So there was a lot of
nobody happy.
Yeah, nobody was happy. There was a lot of pushback. I only know this about one state, about Oklahoma, but it does make you wonder if that kind of
push and pull is
everywhere. With every state added to the Union, or most states added to the Union. So anyway, the American Indians opposed the federal attempts to organize a territory or state out of Indian Territory. These events caused distress among the five civilized tribes, sometimes just called the five tribes. Because there was even a senator from Arkansas who proposed a bill that would divide those the five tribes into three territories, allotting the land, which is last week we talked about. That's how many of the Oklahoma Territory, the allotments, how that impacted the land runs and all that, and separating the land. But he proposed allotting the land, then selling the surplus lands to non-Indian settlers. Later, the three territories would be joined to form the state of Neosho. Well, I mean, hardly anyone's ever heard of that, right? So we know
that didn't go through.
That one didn't. After the Civil War, some of the tribes had fought for the Confederacy and supported that cause, so they had to renegotiate their lands. And so there were attempts to form an intertribal government and all of those things. And ultimately, there was even the proposal to add the state of Sequoia, which this is Oklahoma Territory, this is Indian Territory. And so that was an opportunity that the Native Americans thought would be perhaps most ideal for them. However, there was the issue of, so at one point, business owners, there were white settlers who lived in these lands. The business owners felt like they would have the full burden, tax burden, on them because these lands were not taxable 21 years after statehood. And so they felt like, oh my goodness, this is going to burden us so heavily. We won't be able to handle this. So they wanted the one state instead of two state look. But the whites continued to move into Indian Territory. And the population in 1890, the ratio was 3-to-1. And by 1900, it was 6-to-1, white to American Indian. Yeah. So the 5 tribes retained their sovereignty, and whites could not own land or vote. They could live there, but they couldn't own the land because it was still all tribal land, not allotted. So it's just a crazy thing. Anyway, the Okmulgee Constitution provided for a governor, a bicameral legislature, and a court system. And although the Indian Territory voters did not ratify the document, the event gave American Indian leaders experience that they later applied to their Sequoia Convention, which brought this idea forward. Another thing is that this was an opportunity to double up on party leaders. If there were 2 states, then there would be 2 sets of Republican governor, 2 Republican governors, 2 Republican appointed marshals, to the court systems, all of those things. So both sides are bickering it out,
and then the Democrats would be like, no, because now you're going to have double.
Right, exactly. So let's see, so then in the 1890s, Indian Territory moved closer to statehood. The 1893 Indian Appropriation Bill called for the Dawes Commission to meet with the 5 tribes to start the allotment process. The Atoka Agreement, ratified in 1897, the Chickasaw and Choctaw nations agreed to take their lands in severalty or allotment. In 1898, Congress passed the Curtis Act, which called for the abolishment of tribal governments on March 4th, 1906. And keep that date in mind, March 4th, 1906, because something's going to happen just a little bit later in 1906 that's going to seal the deal. So they realized their governments were going to be defunct, and so the 5 tribes convened the Sequoia Commission in August of 1905 to write a constitution and a memorial to Congress for a separate statehood. It was not even acknowledged by the U.S. Congress. Due to party politics, Indian Territory was bordered by 2 Southern Democratic states, Arkansas to the east, Texas to the south. So President Theodore Roosevelt, a Republican, and the Republican-controlled Congress wanted joint statehood to eliminate the possibility of Indian Territory joining as a democratic state. So on June 16th, 1906, President Roosevelt signed the Oklahoma Enabling Act, which made the way for Oklahoma to become a state. Right. Yeah. So there you have where this state of Sequoia, this is like a present day attempt to do it, this particular map, but at any rate, it failed then, and never again. So Oklahoma Territory existed for about 17 years. And as we saw on the other map, the colors here, this would be Oklahoma Territory, and this part is Indian Territory. Its history is unique. Initially, these unassigned lands right here were opened for land run, and Congress waited a whole year to set up the territorial government. And during that time, there were squabbles
I can only
over,
imagine.
yeah, over the land, we were there first, no,
Mhm.
we were there
Mhm.
first. And so these provisional governments were kind of trying to handle things, and it was just,
Chaos.
I'll be mayor, I'll be sheriff, whatever.
Do we
And
have a volunteer? Do we have?
that's basically, people were trying to, can you imagine being in this situation where a town pops up overnight and there's no state governing body, there's no federal governing body that is stepping in to assist, there's no local
leader.
government. And so everybody it was just literally the Wild West. It was literally the Wild West as far as any kind of government control. But on May 2nd, 1890, so a full year,
Right.
actually after the first land run, the Organic Act for the territory provided the customary framework for
Territorial
the territorial government. And it divided the unassigned lands into 6 counties, and also the no man's land, panhandle, what do they call it? Public land strip up there. It became the 7th county. Lawmakers anticipated additional lands would be added because of the allotment situation that began.
Oh, right through there.
Yeah, well, among all of these lands right here, all of that became allotted later on. So Benjamin Harrison, who was president in 1889 and 90, I guess, he appointed George W. Steele of Indiana as our first territorial governor. He scheduled the election for the legislature on August the 5th. Chosen representatives arrived in Guthrie, which, if you'll remember, was the original state capital. Republicans held a slight edge. The Democrats allied with the emergent People's Party. So the People's Party, also known as the Populist Party, is kind of an agrarian, people who are living here are farmers. They feel like they need that representative from them.
Right.
And so that party kind of came up on the rise. They recruited enough Republicans to create a controlling coalition and elected a member of the Populist Party to preside over each house. And then everybody got preoccupied with things like, where's the new university going to be? Where's the Capitol? Where's the agriculture college, the normal college? And so the legislators failed to pass statutes until the waning days of the session. Then there was such a stalemate and so much squabbling that Governor Steele resigned and moved back to Indiana.
He says, I can't handle you people.
I'm out of here. Peace out, people.
It's been nice knowing you.
So
and that's it for me. Good
yeah, mic drop. So then the territory began growing dramatically. There were 60,417 people in 1890. By 1907, there were over 700,000.
So that's what, 17 years later? Yeah.
Yeah, and that is like, if that was 70, that would be like 1,000 times 100. I don't know. That growth is about 10,000 times increase, 10,000 time increase in population. I don't know. Maybe that's not right. I don't
Hot commodity.
1,000.
Can get your ticket.
Anyway, yeah. So there was I never heard the Jerome Commission referred to as the Cherokee Commission, but it created the legislation that opened these lands, and it convinced the Cherokees to give up this land. The Cherokees lived here, but this was the land they owned. We kind of touched on this last week, and they leased this out to ranchers, and they made money like hand over fist. And then the government found out about that and said, oh,
Okay.
yeah, you guys need to give that land
Yeah.
away. Okay, so they talked them into that.
Mhm.
So that was that between that and convincing Indian tribes to take allotments, this opened the next round of land runs. So we have this map.
Mhm.
Here's the first land run. The second happened in the Iowa, Sac and Fox, Potawatomi, and Shawnee lands.
Mhm.
The third happened in the Cheyenne Arapaho. The fourth was the Cherokee Outlet. And then the fifth land run was in the area that belonged to the Kickapoo tribe.
Mhm.
Okay, so something interesting that I've never known before, I kind of mentioned this maybe last week, where these lands were allotted,
Mhm.
there was like a price per acre assigned to the land so that the tribal members who lived on their allotments, it was like they were selling off the rest of the land. So I saw anywhere from like 59 cents an acre to $2 and something an acre.
Mhm.
So there in these land runs after the unassigned lands,
Mhm.
there were actually, it was like the people actually had to pay for the land. There was a dollar figure attached to their claims that they were supposed to pay.
Mhm.
Okay.
Besides just their filing fee.
Besides just the filing fee, because by taking the allotments, they lost massive amounts of land, in taking their little 160 or 80 or 40 acre allotment, they were giving up thousands and thousands of acres. So they were able to sell it
Okay.
and recoup the money.
Mhm.
So then the settlers were supposed to pay
That money.
back. Well, so the most or many settlers in the four subsequent land openings often failed to make even the minimum payment owed to the federal government, to the federal land office. Hundreds of citizens soon formed what they called the Free Home League to push for federal legislation to expunge their outstanding debt. And Republican territorial delegate Dennis Flynn gained their gratitude when he persuaded Congress to pass the Free Homes Bill in 1900. So that means that they didn't have to pay
Right.
for the land
Right.
after all. At first, I was like, okay, so I've been really teaching this wrong. I didn't understand this. But I mean, in a way, it's like skipping that part where
Mhm.
there was
A
supposed
small
to be
period of
payments.
time,
Yeah. But then
Yeah.
turns out you don't have to pay after all. So,
Sorry if you did.
yeah,
But you didn't have to.
so the territorial area, there was only one Democrat who served as governor. All the others were Republican. In 1901, there was a controversy over the mental sanitarium in Norman. You know where that building is. I mean, the building's still there. I grew up knowing about this place.
What's it called in there? It's not Taliaferro. It's
No, it's like Norman something.
yeah.
I can't think of it. But there was a contract with this sanitarium with the territorial government. Several leading party members held shares in the company, and President Theodore Roosevelt dismissed Governor Jenkins over his for his suspected role in this. So it wasn't just that they were trying to get the sanitarium built in Norman, but there were government officials who had interest in the company they were hiring to do it. Shame, shame, shame. And in case you haven't investigated, this is kind of the story of our state government from the old days. I mean, someone was literally getting impeached every other year or something. So, the internal wrangling from the Republicans did their party little harm. Despite the dominance of Republicans as governor and delegate, remember, appointed positions,
Right.
the two main parties had almost reached parity or equality in numbers, in the legislature by the end of the territorial era, which I think is like how it ought to be. You know,
Right.
there ought to be a
Balance.
balance.
Right.
There ought to be a representation of both sides. Fun fact here, Oklahoma becomes a state in 1907. Our first Republican elected governor is Henry Bellman in 1963. So we were a state for over 50 years
Right.
before we were elected a Republican governor. These things are so crazy to me. And if you'll remember, prior to Henry Bellman, the law was a governor could only serve one term.
Right.
Governor Bellman worked with the legislature to pass the new amendment that allowed for 2 terms as governor, and yet he was exempt from that. So he could not.
He cannot do the 2 terms.
He could not do the 2 terms, which I'm thinking, what an upright thing to do.
Paving the way for some.
Exactly. Let's go back and read about some of these people a little bit. Okay. But he was elected governor again in 1980, from 1987 to 1991. He served again as governor. But anyway, just interesting stuff. So, so there were issues of free homes, placement of institutions, governors, working on national political issues. And then there's this, so there were tough economic times and a terrible drought in the 1890s before statehood. And that brought this big movement of the farmers, which brought about the election of Democratic leadership, because they leaned more toward the populist or a people's party.
Right.
So let me see what my next slide is here. Oh yeah, okay. So in 1898, a majority of Oklahomans kind of rallied together. The war against Spain, Teddy Roosevelt, the Rough Riders, the battles in Cuba, everyone was rallying together. And then that disappeared when territorial citizens faced race issues.
In the early 1890s.
Yeah, yeah. In the early 1890s, Black promoters, mainly from Kansas, come down, and all of these all-Black towns are established in Oklahoma Territory and Indian Territory.
Right.
And so, I mean, this is a time of like, I'm going to say socioeconomic growth, stability. There are banks, there are businesses, there are doctors, there are people who are able in these Black communities. A Black community looks like any other community, and they're strong and they're supportive. And all of these things are going well. And then I've done a lesson. We've done this, on the all-Black towns, where when tough times hit, the farmers who lived in a lot of these communities went to towns that were predominantly white, tried to borrow money because their banks were struggling. The banks in the white communities were not willing to give them loans. And so almost all of these Black communities dissolved. Yeah. It's a great thing to just dig into the history of those all Black.
You don't even hear of them anymore.
There's
several that are no longer around.
Tatum's, not too far from here. Bowley,
ones that are brown or these gray colors are no longer.
Yeah, all these red ones are still communities. So I mean, anyway, it's very interesting. So then the territorial legislature starts adopting Jim Crowism laws, which further segregate and put down these communities. They couldn't send their kids
Yeah.
to public schools, all those things. The notorious sundown ordinances
Right.
prohibiting blacks from
After
spending the
sundown.
night in other communities. And then as statehood approached, more and more Oklahoma is looking more and more like a uh, a home for white settlers,
Right.
and not as much for people
Right.
of color. So the frontier life was difficult, but people trudged on. We know communities grew, the land runs continued, even after, I'm going to go back to here. In 1901, we have the
Land lotteries.
yeah, the land lotteries. Here we have these, let's see, where are these lands here? These up here. These are allotted. People, the Native American people chose allotment up here. So these lands were taken. Greer County, there's the whole dispute. Texas thought this was their land. The
This land
people
is your
of
land.
Oklahoma
This is
Territory,
my land.
the Supreme Court ruled it belonged to Oklahoma. So when that land was opened,
right,
people just went there, picked a piece of land, and then paid some amount of money for it, and they got that land. This was given out by sealed bid. So a lot of different ways to give land away. At any rate, so the Oklahoma Enabling Act happens. Remember, I told you and earlier.
1906 something happened.
Yeah. And this Enabling Act sets the stage for Oklahoma to become a state. It puts the ball in motion. They've been in territory for 17 years. The population has grown. They're checking all the boxes required to become a state. And so then on November 16th, 1907, Oklahoma becomes the 46th state of the Union. Yes.
I think that's right.
It doesn't say that, but it is. Remember the car tags they have now that look like the state, and it looks like that first flag that was red background and the number 46 on it. Yeah. So I think it was New Mexico, Arizona, Alaska, and Hawaii were the 4 after us.
Yes, I know those were the 4 after. Yeah.
So that makes us number category 6. So anyway, these are the troubled times, the ups, the downs, the struggles, the people,
childhood of our state.
Yeah, the infancy,
if you will.
The infancy of our state. Again, I only know really about Oklahoma, but it makes me kind of curious about other states and what were their struggles? What did they look like?
Much bickering went on there.
Yeah, yeah. You know, we just don't know that much.
It has been. We weren't the only ones.
Right. So anyway, it's interesting. It's kind of, I don't know, kind of make me feel, it's sad. It's kind of yucky in some parts.
Yeah.
People are going to be people.
Yeah.
You know, and that can always be a letdown, but
and ugly.
Yeah, exactly. So here we are at the end of the Oklahoma Territory segment of Oklahoma Statehood, the Oklahoma Statehood movement. Like I said, I think we'll go back and pick up and kind of dig into the land runs a little bit more. There's a lot of action.
We're significantly the only one.
Exactly.
We're the only state that has that history.
Yeah, the only land run state. So anyway, be looking for upcoming topics or perhaps an interview. And we're kind of closing down the school season.
I know, school's about out.
Free Family Art Monday starts in the first Monday in June.
Makes me hot thinking about it.
What is that going to be from 1 to 3? We'll be meeting out front under the portico from 1 to 3. On Mondays.
The fam, if you will.
5 Mondays in June, I'm pretty sure.
Just the month of June.
And this is a time for anyone and everyone to just come. We'll have 3 specific projects to do.
Mhm.
And then we always have extra stuff.
Do 1, do 3.
Right. Yeah.
Come and
Whatever
go.
your schedule allows, stay for the 2 hours, come and go. I mean, it's a very laid back, but fun
It is fun.
time. So be looking for that. Maybe we'll pick a couple of projects and do them. We haven't done any
We haven't done any
projects.
projects or cooking.
Yeah. Be looking for a Free Family Art Monday project
That's
or
right.
two, just to kind of give you an idea of
A little
what's coming
sneak
up.
peek.
Yeah.
We'll taste.
We'll drop that in
A
on you
little
next
teaser.
week. A little teaser. That's good. So anyway, thanks for watching today, guys. We'll see you next time. Happy trails.